Duchess of Sussex, Meagan Markle, arrives in Johannesburg today while her husband Harry continues touring a few countries in the southern African region. The couple's been involved in quite different activities, including visiting different charity organizations and playing sport with young people. Now, while the couple seems to have been very warmly received, there are differing perspectives on the role that the British royal family has played and continues to play in South Africa and the continent. Now, political analyst Jamie and Natalia Sifuba, a great-granddaughter of the Isaac Wauchope, who was one of the men who lost their lives in the SS Mendi tragedy in 1917, are here to chat to us this morning. A very good morning to you too. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Morning.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Jamie. People have been caught up with the excitement of the British royalty in South Africa, but then you're not so fazed. Why?
Well, firstly, we have to start off with saying the only Archie we recognize is Morocco. We have to start there. This other Archie, we don't know that well.
Right.
And the reality is, we have to be honest about the institution that the couple represents. You know, people have always been enamored of royalty, especially this particular royal family. You know, we all loved Princess Diana. We all saw her kids rise up. But I think our conversations in Africa have shifted and they've matured. You know, we've started speaking about decolonization. We've started speaking about confronting our colonial legacy. And I don't think that we've had a very honest conversation about the actual institution that is rebranding itself across Africa through this couple, which does have this, you know, person of color on its lineup now, who are speaking quite you know, aggressively as, I am a person of color, I'm here in Africa, here's my baby, a person of color, you know, and we need to reflect actually to say, wait a minute, one, the crown jewels that the Queen wears were taken from South Africa illegitimately. The very wealth that is enjoyed by the royal family, all of these things that we think that they inherited actually came from theft of African resources. And we haven't had a real conversation with the British monarchy about accountability, about reparations, about return of African artifacts. And I don't think that we can skip forward and say, what a cute baby, what a cute couple. We used to see you on Suits, and now your come up and your glow up is so amazing that we can ignore that you actually represent a very repressive institution. So I think it's fine for Sky News and other publications to do that, right? Because they're looking at it from the Western lens. Yeah. But we are Africans first and foremost, and we have to look at things from our Pan-African perspective. And this particular institution does not coincide, you know? And the Belgians have been held to account. Earlier this year, we saw that the UN actually said that Belgium caused a lot of trauma to people in Congo. They had to apologize for their museum. They had to apologize for kidnapping babies from Congo who are now citizens of Belgium. You know, they were kidnapping mixed race babies who were the products of rapes in Congo. And they said, listen, what we did was wrong, what we did was unethical. And there's a conversation even right now about reparations to those particular families. But that conversation obviously should extend to the DRC itself. There should be education programs for young Congolese people to go to Belgium to be able to re-equip themselves to rebuild the state. All of these things.
Well, Jim, I guess that we have to look at both sides of the coin. I mean, when Princess Meagan Markle was addressing Justice Desk, which is an organization that looks at, you know, the lives of the abused women and abused children, or sexually abused, or any other form of abuse, she said, I stand before you as a woman of color and as your sister. I guess then the focus shifts from British royalty to her in person, and you know, the kind of resonance that so many people, so many marginalized women have or strike on her.
Look, two things. One, I think our gender-based activists were the ones who were dealing with GBV before even the arrival of the royal family were doing a phenomenal job. We didn't need an extra lens to know that we have femicide in this country, we have gender-based violence, we have atrocities. But I think that what the royal family does is that they skip the obvious step. You know, sure, you are our sister. Sure, you are a woman of color, but you are also here under brand colonial empire. Okay. That is what you are representing. Your husband is the prince of an institution which was directly responsible for bringing Cecil John Rhodes, one of the most evil men to ever exist on planet Earth, onto the African continent so that we could have our mothers raped, people killed, and, you know, African cultures erased by this man who was trying to create a British colonial project from Cape to Cairo. that's what she also represents. So there was a skip there, you know, and as much as we like them as persons, you know, they are a cool couple. They dress well, they are stylish, they are counter the normal norms of British monarchy and royalty. However, the institution that they represent, there's a reason why they sent them, right? They sent them because they're digestible to Africa.
Okay.
They sent them because the wealth that Africa still has is important to the UK. The Commonwealth is how the United Kingdom continues to maintain its global dominance. It's a very small country with about 60 million people. There's no reason why it should be a permanent member of the Security Council. There's no reason why it should have all of the status. But as the head of the Commonwealth, you know, they can say, look at all of these countries which we still influence. Look at the dominance of our language. I mean, we are speaking in English right now, but we need to be very critical of skipping that step. Because if this family doesn't
We'll extend our analysis on the institution and the supposed apology that needs to come from the British monarchy. But then, Natalia, what do events like this make you feel? I mean, are you at all proud that your grandfather participated in a great war like the one that we've been documenting?
Yes, definitely. I am proud that he did take part there. But in fact, I just want to follow on the discussion to say that the royal visit, the current royal visit, it is something that we should discuss later on. But I want to start from the historical point of view, as he's already mentioned, to say that when we look back, we are a former colony of Britain. And historical factors must be taken into account here. Going back to just the question you've just asked, for an example, South Africa participated in the Great War by virtue of having been part of the British Empire. So they had decided to go to the war against the backdrop of the 1913 Land Act, because already the black person here, the black man in this country, his land had been dispossessed. So if we were to start from there, then we can move to the current visit. As you say, here we are speaking English, the Queen's language, because what happens generally between the colonial master and the colony, the former colonies, they mimic the colonial master in everything. English as an example, instead of speaking any other, although we have 11 languages, but because English is our official language, and besides, because we've been the former colony of Britain, so even the systems that we are using today, we've mimicked the British systems. So if we were to start from there, before we even come to the current visit, so we must look at it from that point of view to say, come 1917, or rather 1914, when the war began, South Africa had to participate because it was more of an instruction, literally, from the empire to say we will then need our colonies to take part in this, because they needed.
Was your family compensated though?
They haven't compensated. Black people were not compensated. Black South Africans were not compensated, but black people from Lesotho, from Swaziland and from Botswana were compensated. Even the colored, South African colors, were compensated. At least they received the Standard Victory and the Service Medal, whilst the blacks did not receive anything. But that is also attributed to the South African government of the time, because remember, 1910, South Africa was already a union. So they were already, they had their own segregational laws by then. So come the war, it was a given that the black man was going to be at the back. They were not recognized at all. So these are the reparations we're talking about, which I would like to comment about later on as the discussion goes on.
And we'll also talk about this book, The Wauchope's Generational Activism, that you had written in a moment. Now, Jamie, back to the British royal's visit. I mean, you spoke of the institution that Prince Harry and Princess Meghan Markle represent. I mean, I'm reminded of this comment by Contralestas Prince Manene saying that he just doesn't get the fuss about, what the fuss is about the royal visit, because first of all, in 1835, they killed Xhosa King Hintsa, and he was killed by the British troops. Now, you're saying that there's a missing discussion about the reparations or the formal apology by the British monarchy.
So, even when we consider that we've jumped the step, right? So we're celebrating. We said, you're welcome, come through, take part in our causes, meet our high-profile figures, but we haven't reflected on the institution itself. This institution underdeveloped Africa. So when you come as the new age representative of this institution, have you apologized to Africa? What reparations have you made to Africa? What engagement have you had with South Africa to restore? The Zulus have their stories, the Xhosas have their stories about how powerful kingdoms were destroyed by the British monarchy for the benefication of London. So we need to have these conversations, because we can't just skip a step because we like people. And I think that this is where we found ourselves. We've almost have an African media, an African intellectual community saying, you're welcome. Why are they being so racist to you in the UK? Why are they judging you? Those are their own issues. As much as we accept our sister as a person of color, as an African descendant, because that is actually what it means, we must still say, but for now, you are on the other side of the fence. You're on the other side of this privilege. And we have been asking people to account for their privilege. It's not enough to dance with us and then we say, it's all good. Everything must now let bygones be bygones. We need to reflect, and we need to actually hold this couple to account. Because guess what? Harry is the one who comes to Africa the most. We're not saying he's not welcome. We're saying, let's have honest conversations about the role your family has played. And by the way, where are our crown jewels? Where are all of these diamonds that De Beers, took from Africa? Because we need to fund tertiary education for students. We have dilapidated clinics and hospitals. We need to pay for extra teachers. And someone is just sitting on all of our best diamonds so that they can put them on a crown. I think that's criminal. I think that's something
so
that we need to
other than an
confront.
official apology, what would you like Britain, what would you like to see Britain do in order to reverse, if at all, the effects of colonialism?
So number one, they must bring back all of those diamonds that are still within the Queen's personal collection. All of those were illegitimately acquired. We need to get back all of our artifacts. But beyond that, they must honor the Lancaster Agreement in Zimbabwe, for instance. You see how they skipped Zimbabwe as a country, a country that was named after Cecil John Rhodes, Rhodesia. We need to have these accountings. We need to have more support for African students to go to British universities. We can't have a situation where people came without getting visas from us. And then when Africans go back there, they say that it's a migrant crisis and that what are we doing on their shores and we're here to ruin British life. No, you ruined our African traditions, norms, and customs. And then now that Africa is a mess as a result of your project, you then exclude us from the very proceeds of everything that you kept. And these are the kind of things that if they were championing them, I would take them more seriously as being in line with Pan-African goals. Because our goals as Pan-Africans are not similar to the goals of the British Empire. And as much as we need to continue and make our own agency, it's not a victim position that I'm coming from, but if you have abused in the past, even though we're charting our own path, creating our own democracy, you can't just pop in for a visit and make it seem as if, Africa loves me, Africa accepts me, you guys must also accept me. By the way, here's my baby, right? The only Archie we know and we recognize, until we get an apology, is Moroka.
Archie Moroka. All right, then, Natalia, let's talk about your book, The Wauchope's Generational Activism. What is it that you're trying to highlight here?
I'm trying to highlight a lot of things in terms of our political activism as a family, right from our great-grandfather during 1800s until at least just prior to our democracy. To say that here's a family that has participated in the political issues of the country right from that time. not only 76 like myself, I'm a class of 76. So it's a story that has everybody there who had participated, but to showcase that you don't have to start recently. You have to look back further in your family to check as to where do you come from, what do you understand, what actually made the latest generation like myself in terms of the family hierarchy to participate in the first place during the 1976 era, or even prior to that, for an example, with my elder brother, George Wauchope, who had then, was a contemporary of Steve Biko, who was my brother who has been who had studied in Fort Hare, then expelled because of his activism of SASO. So the book, it's about the whole family from one generation to the other.
Just in wrapping, we saw Meghan Markle engaging with and participating in sport and, having discussions with some of the charity organizations. Don't you think that, in a way, sort of helped mend the painful memories or bridge the gaps that existed between both countries?
In that regard, when I look at it, in fact, the husband, Harry himself, he's actually following in his mother's footsteps. Yeah. He is here to assert himself and to carry the legacy of Princess Di, who, has had a few projects here in South Africa, taking into account her relationship with our former president, Nelson Mandela, and talking about Madiba. He himself had a relationship with the Queen as well. Talking about reparation, I can even add to say that, in fact, it might be a little, but the whole thing about the First World War is actually the recognition both by the British government, including the then South African government, to say these men had decided to join the war effort because by then they had almost, failed in all their attempts to fight the segregational laws by then. So by virtue of going to the war, it was because they were thinking at that time that when they come back, they will be given political space. Britain will award them, will help them to almost, talk to the South African regime.
We don't have much time, unfortunately. Just in closing, Jamie, please be as brief as you possibly can. I mean, we've seen Britain holding celebrations for the centenary celebrations of the SS Mendi. Isn't that a form of an apology?
No, we need to see that money. They need to pay back the money, as the famous phrase goes. To me, this is just like a vegetable salad that they bring here when people are starving. You can't come with window dressing when the people are actually looking for a wholesome nourishment and they're undernourished as a result of your actions. If they had actually come and said, every charity we're visiting, we're giving 10 million rands, I would have taken them more seriously because I would have known that this is not an institutional PR exercise, right? We need to see real conversations, not just symbolic gestures to Africa. We need to see real reparations. We know the history. Okay. And unfortunately, colonialism doesn't get as discussed in South Africa because we had this thing called apartheid. Sure. But we mustn't forget that Cecil John Rhodes came here and devastated Africa, and this was one of the bases where he did it from. It's not enough to send your cute couple and then act like it's all good.
All right. Jamie, Natalia, thank you so much for your reflections. Much appreciated. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you for
Well, that was Jamie Mighti sharing his views on the royal family's visit to South Africa and whether our country should disregard the shared history of the two countries. This is Morning